Coming up, we'll talk about H1N1 flu and what you can do to prepare. It's next on the St. Paul Forum. Hello and welcome again to the St. Paul Forum. I'm Mike Wassenaar. On this edition of the St. Paul Forum, we'll be talking about the flu season, which is this time of year typically, but it's complicated because of the emergence of the H1N1 virus and the effects that it has on communities across the world. Over the next half hour, we'll be talking about the H1N1 virus and what you could be doing here in St. Paul to be thinking about preparations ahead of time with Rob Fulton. Rob is the Director of Public Health with Ramsey County, and he joins us here for the half hour to talk about H1N1 and preparations this year, both on the grand scale, but also on the individual scale, what individuals can be doing as they're preparing for flu season this year. Rob, welcome to the St. Paul Forum.
Thank you.
Why, before we get into sort of specifics, why is this season different with the emergence of H1N1 as a virus?
Well, that's different because now there are two viruses. There's the seasonal flu virus, which we predict usually in January for the coming year what that will be like. And then last spring we got a new strain of virus, H1N1, which had not been seen since 1956.
And this has been described as sort of a bird flu
it's
strain
not real,
or a swine flu strain. There's all sorts of euphemisms for it, right?
The issue is that flu usually starts in an animal and then is transmitted to man. And they generally come from a mixture of birds and pigs. And generally that's why most all flus start where you have a lot of cross-section between birds, pigs, and humans, which is in Southeast Asia and China.
And the viruses mutate
Right.
and the like. And the regular flu virus mutates on a regular basis, and that's why there's a slightly different variation
Each
in
year.
flu shots every year. It's why you need to have a flu update that occurs every year if you're getting a flu shot. That's normal. Why are public health officials so concerned about H1N1?
Well, because the major pandemic that had the highest death rate in 1918 was an H1N1 virus. And we haven't seen H1N1 since 1956. And so an appearance of a new viral strain, and that's why it's called the novel H1N1 flu, just has people very concerned because they're afraid that it might mutate into something that appears to be much more serious in terms of deaths. Right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. H1N1 is acting much like the seasonal flu. However, it is attacking a different age range. Generally, the seasonal flu focuses mostly our concerns about it are on the elderly people, and they're the ones who are most vulnerable to it. With the H1N1, it seems to be children and young adults who seem to be the most vulnerable to catching this. So it's a different set of people that we have to try and get vaccine to.
Is there any supposition of why that is? I mean, obviously this is sort of a moving target as, you know, a pandemic evolves and as viruses are spread, but is there any supposition about why there's a different population that's vulnerable?
Well, one supposition, and again it hasn't been proven, but one supposition is up until 1956, almost all the flu that we had in the U.S. was H1N1. In 1957, we had the first change in the standards of flu with H2N1, and then that has changed over the time. And so they think that people who were alive and in school, particularly during that period of time prior to 1956, are probably less susceptible to catching the H1N1, and that the people who are younger and more likely to be in congregate settings like schools or young adults places are the folks where this is going to get transmitted first.
So colleges and clubs as well
as
schools. So are they acting as sort of early warning mechanisms at this point so that people know about outbreaks basically through school health departments and all that?
Well, yes, schools are really like the canary in the coal mine here, where the state is asking each school district and each school building to report when they have more than 5% of their students absent. In the early part of the year, September, October, generally you don't have a lot of illness. And so if there is illness and large increases of illness, then we suspect that's probably H1N1 in the schools. And so that will tell us where this is being transmitted and where there may be areas that need to get vaccination supplies ahead of other areas.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about sort of preparations that people are taking this fall. But I guess, when you talk about the use the word pandemic, and you talk about major outbreaks like the '57 outbreak or the outbreak that occurred after World War I, I think it alarms people.
It does.
Right?
And pandemic simply means that it's in many different countries.
But how alarmed should people be?
Well, people should be concerned about those individuals that have something like asthma or a chronic heart condition or cerebral palsy, because they're the most vulnerable. Pregnant women are very vulnerable to this because during pregnancy your immune system is decreased. And they are very concerned about young babies less than six months and younger. So I think you have to be concerned there. But generally, people who have gotten H1N1 this spring and this fall have been sick for 5 to 7 days and have recovered fully.
So as people are watching the program here, what should they be thinking about as they're sort of preparing for flu season and they're thinking about H1N1?
Well, they need to be thinking about how they protect themselves. And that is, wash your hands, cough into your elbow.
So that we're not doing this sort of
Right.
hand-to-hand
stuff,
transport.
right.
Or,
and you may want to stop shaking hands. And if you do get sick and have a fever and a sore throat and a cough, which are the flu-like illness symptoms, stay home.
And this also is sort of a double message too. Employers should be really encouraging employees not to be heroic if they get sick. I mean, very often people feel pressure to keep going into work if they're feeling sick.
Correct. And we have, for example, in the county, we have what's called a continuity of operations plan, and many large businesses have that. How do we operate when 15, 20, maybe even 30% of our employees aren't showing up for work, and how do we handle that? The police and fire in St. Paul have a very well-developed plan for if a lot of fire personnel are off ill, what stations and how they man those stations. So companies, particularly businesses that have a lot of public contact, need to be concerned about that. The other issue is, of course, if you have a young workforce who have elementary school-age children and those kids are getting sick, and you have to stay home to care for them. So it's not just people who are sick, but people who are home caring for the sick.
So I mean, as people have seen the outbreak in the spring, it's about a 5 to 7 day illness. So then it's pretty much, if you have to care for a child, it's like a week-long commitment at that point,
right.
At least.
And they have changed. When this came out in the spring, we had talking about staying home for 14 days. That was reduced to 7 days, and then now it is 24 hours past when your fever has gone. If your fever's gone for 24 hours, then you can return to school. And school programs are all sending these messages home to parents for what to look for and when to keep them at home and when to let them come back.
We should mention to viewers here as we're talking about this, the Ramsey County Public Health Department actually will have updates on a regular basis for St. Paulites, people within Ramsey County, not just about the sort of status of the flu this season, but also other resources that are available. That'll be available on the Ramsey County Public Health website, which we're listing right now on the screen for you. We'll have that for you as we continue the conversation here on this edition of the St. Paul Forum. And I won't go through the URL in detail here, but we'll have that for you here, and we'll keep mentioning it for you as we're having the conversation here on the St. Paul Forum with Rob Fulton. So the other thing I guess that complicates this thing is that the flu season continues. Plain old flu continues along with the special H1N1 season, correct?
That's correct. And the seasonal flu, and we're encouraging people to get vaccinated for the seasonal flu, and we would encourage them to get vaccinated for H1N1